So it's kind of both, really. You have this idea of what you want that's kind of an ideal in your mind, but this is tempered by what happens to be good that year.
Yeah, and for me, I didn't want to use Cabernet Sauvignon. I was like trying to avoid that. I was trying to, it was hard for me. I was like, it's going to be a 3 varietal blend, and that's it. That's what I want it to be. But I kept going back to the blend with, Cabernet Sauvignon, and I thought, you know what, it's a much better, more interesting wine, and that was it. So that's what it. The bottom line is, what is the best wine possible, not based on any kind of recipe or theory.
Would you maybe contrast this year with another year, which might have a still something you're proud of, but is a contrasting or different flavor that particular year to 13? I gather the 14 is very similar.
14 is similar, but once you get to the 15 and 15 and 17 are similar too. 16 is a 15, 16, 17 are all similar in terms of the blending style, but very different in terms of the intensity and the maturity and the quality of the fruit. And so for me, 15 is fantastic. I think that's might be the best overall blend, and I think it takes it to a whole nother level. It's still incredibly young. And then 17 is still too early to tell, but 17 also is maybe even above the 15, though it's still young. It's so intense right now that you don't pick up a lot of nuance. It's still too young. But the 15 is really starting to show well now. And I'm really excited about the 15, where you'll get more of that Tannat concentration and tannin. And then, with the lesser amounts of Malbec, it brings down a little bit that bright red fruit component and brings in more of the depth of the Merlot in the mid palate. So 15 is fantastic, but very different style than the 13 and 14.
And one more, sorry to monopolize, but this is a huge wine. And I tend to think, as with the other one that somebody commented on, it needs to be decanted and maybe even left out for a while just to sort of breathe itself into its full, I don't know, bloom. What kind of treatment would you suggest that we do with this wine, similar to what you were commenting on for the Petit Verdot?
Yeah, I would open this at least a couple of weeks ahead of time. I would open this. I would open it, a good hour or a couple hours before. Depends on your decanter. Depends how you want to let it breathe. It really depends on the amount of air you want to expose the wine to. If you have a pretty wide decanter that can have a lot of air, maybe an hour plus is safe. But you can even open it and take a glass out of the bottle and leave the bottle open, all day and have it later in the day, so just get a little slower exposure to air than an immediate amount of air. If you have a decanter, actually, like this, that is ideal in terms of the amount of air, and you can swirl it around, and really something like that would be great for this wine with a good hour to 2 hours of aeration.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments? Questions?
Yes, I have a question. You talked a lot about a lot of experimentation and tweaking to get it to where you like it, but what about the whole concept of the happy accident? Has that ever worked in winemaking?
It's worked, but I would never admit to it, right? No. No, there's a lot of things that I've done, not just with this one, other things that, have just happened without pre-planning. I mean, pretty much how I first made the Petit Manseng, a dry style. Everyone, up until 2012, just about everyone in Virginia had made a semi-sweet to sweet style Petit Manseng. And, I fermented some dry just to see what happened. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best, and it's ever since then, it's been my one of our best wines and most reputable wines. So there's things, just like that happen. Just, let's see what happens. Just throw it up in the air and see what works. And so it happens all the time in winemaking. We experiment, we try things, and whether it's like the Tobacco Barn drying, that was something that just kind of, let's see what happens. And it's been a huge hit. So yeah, I mean, you got to have that. This is, it's a commercial winery, but it's also still kind of a artisan, craft, and need to be artistic and look for different ways to express the grapes that we have. And so we're always, trying new things and seeing what works and not knowing, and sometimes we're really surprised.
I have to say, I agree with Miss Burrows that your Manseng is a revelation, especially after trying quite a bit of other Manseng around the state. I love that dry, and it's very consistently wonderful. I'm interested in the Tobacco Barn drying of the grapes. This sounds very similar to something that is done in northern Italy when they make the Amarone wine.
Yeah.
Is that something you've considered pushing that far? That's pretty pushing it far. Or is that just something you're using as an expedient?
No, that's where it's based on the drying of grapes that's done in Italy and also in France. And it's a technique that's done, originally started doing that more for a late harvest dessert wine style that we actually, when I first started doing this, I was doing it in the winery with fans, just putting fans around grapes stacked in the trays and doing it that way. But that was not the best way for, the grapes were a lot of them were rotting. They weren't getting enough airflow. It was hard. It worked, but it wasn't the best technique. And then we bought grapes from a guy who he's a tobacco farmer who also has grapes. And he, suggested playing around. We actually experimented with him first before I went out and bought our first Tobacco Barn. And now we have two. And that was just an experiment we did with him that was just phenomenal, that we originally did with white grapes. And then it just, it was a no-brainer when I saw the technique and how to do it. And it was a learning process. And then we did it primarily to make dessert wines, very sweet wines. But then I saw that we could actually concentrate, red varieties that had been diluted, or, also just for a nuance to add in to a red blend, even if they're not diluted, just something to make a little bit, higher alcohol portion of it. We blend in with it's a very different style of grape that comes out of the Tobacco Barn when it's concentrated. So it's nice as a nuance as well.
Michael,
One more. Sorry. How long do you think the El Scott will age? Assuming, I keep it in a vino type thing, and I noticed it's a really big wine, and it seems to me as though it has 2013 is a while ago, but it has a way to go yet.
Yeah, this for me easily 5 more years, easily. After that, maybe 5 to 10. Yeah. Ivy, did you have a question?
I was just thinking that it could be a plug for a wine that we're releasing in next month.
Oh.
if they're allowed to know.
marketer, my marketing genius.
Coming in March.
Yeah, so we actually have a limited production, 50 cases made of a Cabernet Sauvignon that was completely done in the Tobacco Barn, similar to an Amarone style. And it was aged over 3 years in barrel. We just bottled it in December. and we've named it Puissance, the French word for strong, powerful, because it's about 15% alcohol. It's a big, deep, rich Cabernet Sauvignon, and it has a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, barely noticeable, of residual sugar. I mean, most people would think it's a dry wine, but technically it has, I think it's like 3 grams, something like that, like 0.3 or 4% residual sugar. I mean, most people won't even taste it, but it's a big, high alcohol Cabernet Sauvignon that we haven't officially released yet. When are we releasing it, Ivy?
I think we agreed to like the 3rd week in March.
Oh, really? That's soon. Okay.
Maybe. Is that? I don't
I
know.
don't
I'll
know.
have to go look.
But anyway, there's only 50 cases made of this vintage. So
Maybe it was April.
April is April.
I don't want to make any promises now.
Well, sign me up.
I was very excited about this wine, and I was thought this is gonna be our winner in the Governor's Cup, and they didn't understand. I think it was too much alcohol, too big for Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's usually the case. And the wine that I think is going to do well doesn't.
Hey, Michael, can you talk a little bit about blending and the process? I mean, like, how do you know when it's time to blend, when all the grapes are ready to blend? How long does it take you? Is it all subjective? Is it you just tasting it? Or, is there some kind of scientific you measure for certain things? Or does it vary depending on the wine?
Well, traditionally for the red blends that I do, or all the reds, basically, I start the process in the June, the following year after the harvest. So by then the wines have gone through the malolactic fermentation, the secondary, it's aged, and they've had time to really kind of evolve and start to show their true character. And so I'll start tasting through all the wines then and start selecting the barrels. I taste every barrel and make comments and notes and score them. And then I start the blending process in June. And then before the harvest, at some point between mid-June, end of June and August, we will do the first racking, as it's called, where we'll take the wine out of the barrels and we'll make the blends and then put them back into barrel for another year of aging. So it gives them a whole year already blended to age together. So we get the really, good complexity of the blend together. And so that's traditionally how I do it. And there's no set, start date. It's just I taste the wines and say it's time to start the blending process. And it could take a couple of weeks. It could take a couple of months till I'm happy with how I want to move forward.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Other comments?
Hey, Michael, would the tobacco, would it be considered reverse osmosis or is it dehydration?
Dehydration. It's dehydration. Tobacco barns can get up to 100. We send them on a thermostat to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and they run on a propane burner, and then they just the fans are on all the time, so it's always blowing air. It comes from the floor up. The floors are vented and the air flows and circulates. So the air alone could do it, but the heat helps keep the humidity out and helps to speed up the process a little bit.